In the glittering halls of an exclusive restaurant, one spilled drop of wine shattered a young woman's world. Emily Vargas, a law student fighting to keep her sister alive, was humiliated and fired in front of powerful patrons, cast aside by a billionaire whose cruelty knew no bounds. But what began as a night of disgrace soon ignited a battle that reached far beyond a single dining room. Because the man who silenced her carried a secret so dark, it could destroy his entire empire. Emily Vargas counted heartbeats with the clink of glassware, steadying her hands as she polished another wine glass to a perfect, breathless shine. Aurelia was already humming, a temple of velvet banquettes and low amber light where fortunes were whispered over oysters. The air smelled of truffle oil, scorched rosemary, and a sweetness like old leather. She had learned to read this room the way a sailor reads tides. The slightest change in tone foretold a storm. Tonight, the current ran fast. She had been on her feet since noon, moving between a civil procedure lecture and a double shift, living on coffee and discipline. In the locker, her textbooks waited like stern chaperones. In her pocket, a folded note with Claire's latest lab results pressed against her thigh. The numbers rose and fell like a language she pretended to understand. Treatment worked in increments. So did faith. Every tip mattered. Every hour mattered. The math of survival was brutal and honest. Mr. Donovan hovered near the host's stand, tie pulled too tight, eyes flicking between the door and his watch. He was a small man with a careful smile, a man who survived by anticipating trouble and stepping aside before it struck. His voice darted through the room in quick bursts. Candles relit on 4. 2 more Petrus to cellar. Keep the aisle by 7 clear. He caught Emily's eye and beckoned her closer with a tremor he tried to hide. Table 7 is yours, he said. Flawless service. No delays. No chatter. He is arriving at the top of the hour. Understood, Emily answered. He took a breath that did not help. Emily, this guest is not like the others. He can change a person's month with one comment. He can change a business with a phone call. We do not give him a reason to do either. I hear you, she said, and she did. She heard the fear behind the words. She checked her station again. Crisp linens. Silver aligned like soldiers. Decanters that could hold a small lake. She checked the floor plan, calculated routes, rehearsed the specials under her breath, landing each syllable like a pianist striking clean notes. Beyond the bar, snow light from the front windows held the city at a distance, a glittering audience she could not afford to join. In the reflection of a mirrored column, she caught herself and looked away quickly. The uniform added years of poise she did not feel. Her hands were steady. Her jaw was set. She inhaled and tasted citrus and heat. The door opened. The room shifted in a quiet, visible way, like a wheat field leaning beneath a wind. 2 security men entered, not by posture but by absence of doubt. Then Alexander Drake stepped through the threshold, and even the glassware seemed to listen. He wore simplicity that had cost a fortune. A dark suit sharp enough to slice air. A watch that announced its price in silence. His expression did not change. It never needed to. A woman followed, stately and pale, more jewel than companion, her gaze already chasing the menu for prestige. Mr. Donovan hurried forward, all apology and gratitude, and Emily moved to table 7, a small stage dressed in white. She kept her breath low and even. She introduced herself with a practiced tone and received no acknowledgement. Drake set his phone on the linen as if it required its own setting and spoke without looking up. Water. Still. Cold. Yes, sir, Emily said. Would you like lemon or lime? Neither. She poured water, set glasses with a soft, exact sound, and began the specials. Her voice was smooth. The words were careful. Drake did not raise his eyes. The woman, whose name would later appear on the reservation as Celeste Rowan, listened with half interest, stopping Emily only to ask whether the scallops were diver caught and whether the chef would consider a saffron emulsion instead of beurre blanc. Emily answered both questions precisely, wrote nothing down, and did not falter. Wagyu, A5, medium rare, Drake said when she finished. Petrus. 2009. Very good, Emily said. Would you prefer decanting? Drake's mouth turned, not quite a smile. Just bring it. She stepped away, feeling the heat rise from her collarbones to her cheekbones, and moved in a pattern that wasted not a single step. Orders placed. Wine retrieved. Decanter ready in case of a late change. She carried the bottle like a secret, presented the label, and waited. Drake flicked his gaze, a brief, cold beam. Accepted, he said. She set the cradle, cut the foil, and eased the cork in one clean pull, mind calm, wrists sure. The room's low music and round conversation made a dome of pleasant sound beneath which Emily worked like a metronome. The first pour was a measured arc, garnet and light. The neck of the bottle hovered above crystal. In her periphery, a busser pivoted too quickly with a tray of bread and small knives glinting. His shoulder grazed her elbow. The bottle tipped a fraction too far. A line of red gathered on the lip and trembled, poised between surface and gravity, between order and consequence, between the known path of the evening and a cliff she had hoped not to see. Emily breathed once, steady and exact, ready to correct the angle, ready to save the moment, ready to keep the night from breaking. The drop of wine fell, a crimson arc in slow motion. It splashed against the perfect white linen, a wound blooming beside Alexander Drake's hand. The stain spread in silence, a ruby star bleeding outward across the cloth. Emily froze, then recovered instantly, napkin in hand, dabbing gently, voice calm. My apologies, sir. It was an accident. I'll have this taken care of immediately. Drake did not look at the cloth. He looked at her. His eyes were pale steel, unblinking, the kind of gaze that searched for weakness and then pressed until it broke. A faint curve touched his lips. Not amusement. Something darker. You're sorry, he said, his voice low and deliberate. That's all. Sorry. The restaurant seemed to contract. Chairs shifted. Forks stilled. Celeste Rowan, his companion, reached for her glass, her hand trembling slightly. Alexander, it was nothing. The busser bumped her. Quiet, he snapped, the word like a whip crack. Celeste sank back into her seat. His gaze never left Emily. You stumble through life, leaving your mistakes behind you, and then you offer sorry like it is currency, he continued, voice pitched just high enough for nearby tables to catch every word. Tell me your name. Emily Vargas, she answered, holding his stare. Emily Vargas. He repeated her name slowly, as if it tasted bitter. Do you know your problem, Emily Vargas? You lack discipline. Attention to detail. The plague of your generation. You think the world owes you something. Maybe you're one of those students wasting your parents' money on a useless degree, believing dignity is your birthright while you spill wine on people who actually matter. Each word cut with surgical precision. Emily felt heat rise in her chest, not from shame, but from anger. Claire's face flashed in her mind, her little sister, fragile in a hospital bed, smiling through pain. Every insult Drake hurled struck not only Emily, but the sacrifices she had made to keep Claire alive. She straightened, shoulders squared. The napkin stilled in her hand. The polite smile she had practiced 1,000 times slipped away. When she spoke, her voice was low but steady, carrying across the table like a blade sliding free from its sheath. My attention to detail, she said, is the only reason your glass has stayed full, your table cleared, and your dinner flawless, despite your deliberate rudeness. The spill was an accident, for which I apologized. Your cruelty, however, is a choice. A hush fell over Aurelia. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Celeste's eyes widened. Mr. Donovan, watching from the bar, paled as if the ceiling were collapsing. Drake leaned back, his jaw tight, his temples throbbing with barely restrained rage. He had built an empire on fear, and no one, certainly not a waitress, had ever spoken to him like this. Mr. Donovan. Drake's voice exploded across the dining room, sharp and violent. Every patron turned to watch. Donovan scurried over, his face tight with panic. "Yes, Mr. Drake. Is there a problem?" "A problem?" Drake jabbed a finger toward Emily. "This insolent girl insulted me to my face. Fire her. Right now." The demand hung heavy in the air, undeniable, crushing. Donovan looked at Emily, his eyes pleading. "Please, Emily. Apologize. Make this right." "I have nothing to apologize for," she said softly, but firmly. That was it. The final straw. Drake's smirk returned, triumphant. "Fire her, Donovan, or I will make sure this restaurant never sees another customer of worth again." Donovan's shoulders sagged. His lips trembled. "You're fired, Emily. Collect your things. Get out." The word struck harder than any insult. The room tilted. Whispers rose like smoke, curling around her as she stood motionless, napkin still clutched in her hand. Humiliation pressed hot against her skin. Drake leaned back in his chair, satisfied, the predator savoring his kill. Emily inhaled, slow and deep, and let the napkin fall onto the table. She met Drake's gaze one final time, her expression calm, unbroken. Then she turned and walked away, past the murmurs, past the pity, past the weight of 100 staring eyes. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. It hit her lungs like glass, but she kept her head high. Behind her, Aurelia glowed like a palace. Inside, Alexander Drake drank his wine and believed he had won. But Emily Vargas walked into the darkness with a vow burning inside her chest. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Emily's footsteps echoed along the cracked pavement, steady but heavy. The city lights blurred through tears she refused to let fall in public. She clutched the small key to her locker at Aurelia as though it still meant something. It was only a piece of metal now, cold and useless, a relic of the life she had just lost. When she reached her apartment, the door groaned on its hinges. The small third-floor walk-up smelled faintly of dust and reheated noodles. Her textbook sat stacked on the desk, spines cracked and pages littered with notes, as if mocking her. What good was studying law when she couldn't even defend herself from a man's arrogance? She sank onto the worn sofa, its springs protesting, and let her head fall into her hands. She had promised Claire she would be strong. She had promised her that every shift at Aurelia was worth it. Now the promise felt broken. She pictured her sister's thin frame curled in a hospital bed, tubes and monitors blinking. How could she tell Claire she had been fired? How could she admit defeat? The silence was unbearable. It pressed in from the walls, from the shadows, from the dim yellow bulb above. Finally, the sobs broke through. They tore from her chest in ragged waves until she was empty, until the tears dried into a hollow ache. And in that emptiness, something else began to stir. Her eyes drifted to the thick volume lying open on the desk, Employment and Labor Law. She wiped her face with her sleeve, crossed the room, and traced her finger across a passage she had underlined weeks ago. Wrongful termination. Hostile work environment. Retaliation. She read the words again and again, each one striking her like a bell. Donovan hadn't fired her for poor performance. He had fired her to appease a billionaire's ego. She hadn't stumbled. She had stood her ground, and been punished for it. Her heart quickened. This wasn't just about pride. It wasn't only about her lost paycheck. It was about the law. And the law was supposed to protect people like her from exactly this. She pulled her laptop onto the desk, the screen glowing pale against her swollen eyes. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Who could she turn to? Not a private attorney, she couldn't afford that. Her options were slim. Then a name flashed in her mind, sharp as a spark: Professor Lila Carter. Professor Carter was head of the university's legal aid clinic, a woman known for her sharp wit and sharper cross-examinations. Emily remembered one lecture in particular, Carter pacing before the class, eyes blazing as she recounted how a single plaintiff had brought down a massive corporation through relentless litigation. "Never underestimate the power of a well-pleaded complaint," she had said. "The law is the great equalizer." Equalizer. The word resonated now more than ever. Emily began to type, pouring her entire night into an email. She detailed every moment at Aurelia, the way Drake dismissed her, the humiliation, Donovan's terrified compliance, the firing. She described the humiliation in front of the diners, the weight of injustice pressing her into silence. She wrote until her wrists ached and her eyelids grew heavy. When she hit send, it was after 2 in the morning. She half expected nothing. Professors were busy. Legal clinics were overwhelmed. But less than 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. From Professor Carter. Subject: urgent. Message: my office. 8 a.m. Don't be late. Emily stared at the screen, heart pounding, disbelief flooding her chest. She hadn't been dismissed. She hadn't been ignored. She had been heard. For the first time since walking out of Aurelia, she smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. She closed the laptop, brushed her hair back from her damp cheeks, and whispered to herself, "It's not over." When dawn painted the sky gray, Emily was still awake, dressed in her neatest blouse, notes tucked into her bag. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. Tired eyes. Determined jaw. She thought of Claire. She thought of Alexander Drake's smirk. She thought of justice. And then, with her shoulders squared and her chin lifted, Emily Vargas stepped out of her apartment into the chill of morning. She was no longer just a waitress without a job. She was a plaintiff in the making. Emily arrived at the university's legal aid clinic before the clock struck 8. The building loomed with old stone and ivy, its narrow windows glinting in the morning light. Her hands trembled as she gripped her notebook, filled with every detail she could remember from that night. She had written until the pages swelled with ink, refusing to let a single moment slip away. Inside, the clinic smelled faintly of strong tea and old books. Students bustled through the halls carrying files, their eyes alight with the thrill of cases larger than themselves. But none of them felt the weight Emily carried, the memory of humiliation pressing against her ribs like a bruise. Professor Lila Carter's office was tucked behind a row of bookshelves. Emily hesitated at the door before knocking. A commanding voice called out, "Come in." The professor sat behind a large oak desk stacked with files, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her sharp eyes fixed on Emily the moment she entered. She gestured toward the chair opposite her. "Sit. Tell me everything. Leave nothing out." Emily's throat tightened, but she began. She described the elegance of Aurelia, the suffocating tension, the wine that slipped, and Alexander Drake's calculated cruelty. She explained Donovan's fear, his trembling voice when he fired her. She spoke of the whispers that followed her out the door, the cold night, the tears she could not hold back. Professor Carter listened in silence, her fingers steepled beneath her chin, her expression unreadable. She did not interrupt, did not offer sympathy or outrage. She absorbed every detail like a judge weighing evidence. When Emily finished, the silence stretched long enough for doubt to creep in. "Perhaps I was foolish to email you," Emily whispered. "Maybe it's hopeless." Professor Carter's gaze sharpened. "Hopeless, Miss Vargas, is a word used by those who have already lost. You have not lost. The law is a weapon. The question is whether you have the nerve to wield it." Emily straightened. "I do." "Good." Carter rose from her chair, crossing to a cabinet. She pulled out a file and flipped it open, scanning quickly. Alexander Drake is not a man who lashes out only once. Bullies of his breed repeat their sins. Restaurants that bend to their will often harbor other violations: wage theft, illegal tip pools, undisclosed deductions. If we can establish a pattern, we make this bigger than one night. She turned back, eyes narrowing with intensity. This won't be easy. Drake will bury you under paperwork. He will hire men whose fees exceed your yearly rent just to intimidate you. They will try to paint you as a disgruntled employee looking for a payout. Are you prepared for them to dig through your life? Emily thought of Claire, frail, brave Claire who needed every ounce of her strength. She thought of Drake's smirk, of the way Donovan trembled in his presence. She inhaled deeply. Yes. I'm prepared. A smile ghosted across Carter's lips. Then you are no longer a waitress without a job. You are a plaintiff. And plaintiffs, Miss Vargas, change the world. She began laying out a plan. First, Emily must record every detail of her employment: schedules, shifts, conversations with staff, every whispered complaint about missing tips. Second, Carter would draft a demand letter to Donovan by the afternoon. It would be polite, professional, and terrifying. Emily scribbled furiously, her heart racing. She was no longer powerless. She had a voice, and the law would amplify it. By midday, Carter's demand letter was sealed in a thick envelope, its language precise and sharp as glass. It accused Aurelia of wrongful termination, retaliation, and fostering a hostile work environment. It demanded preservation of all payroll and tip records for the last 3 years. It warned of impending litigation should Donovan fail to comply. When the courier carried the letter away, Emily exhaled as though she had released more than breath, she had released fear. Far across town, in his plush office above Aurelia, Mr. Donovan would soon slit open that envelope. He would read words that made his blood run cold, words that threatened to unravel secrets he had buried for years. And somewhere even higher, in a glass tower scraping the sky, Alexander Drake would soon hear her name again. Emily Vargas. This time not as a waitress, but as the adversary he never saw coming. Mr. Donovan sat in his office at Aurelia with a tumbler of scotch sweating in his hand. He told himself the drink was to calm his nerves, but the truth pressed harder. The letter from Professor Carter lay unfolded on his desk, each line a blade cutting deeper. Wrongful termination. Retaliation. Hostile work environment. And worse, the demand to preserve payroll records, time sheets, and tip-out logs going back 3 years. His hands shook. Those logs were poison. For years he had skimmed a so-called administrative fee off the server's pooled tips, a practice he knew was illegal but excused as survival. Now, if those documents surfaced, Aurelia could collapse in a matter of weeks. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering across the carpet, amber liquid soaking into the fibers. His breath quickened. He reached for his phone, scrolling to a name he never wanted to call but now must. Alexander Drake. He needs to know, Donovan muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. He caused this. He must fix it. Miles away, in a steel and glass tower that commanded the skyline, Alexander Drake presided over a boardroom like a king in his court. Financial reports glowed on screens. Analysts and executives waited on his verdicts, every syllable he spoke treated like commandment. His phone buzzed. His assistant approached, hesitant. "Sir, it's Mr. Donovan. He says it's urgent." Drake sighed, irritation pulling at his mouth. "What now? Did the dishwasher break?" The assistant swallowed. "He's been served with a legal notice. From a law clinic. It concerns the waitress from the other night. Emily Vargas." Drake's eyes narrowed. "Show me." Moments later, the demand letter glowed on his tablet. He read quickly, his expression shifting from annoyance to cold amusement. A law student. A legal aid clinic. They dared to threaten him. "Get Leonard Cromwell on the line," he ordered. "Tell him I have a pest problem that needs extermination." Within the hour, Drake was connected to Cromwell, a 60-year-old legal titan whose reputation was carved in ruined opponents. His voice rumbled through the line like gravel. "She's claiming hostile work environment. Ridiculous. A nuisance suit. We'll bury her under motions before she ever sees a courtroom." "I don't want it dismissed," Drake cut in, his tone like ice. "I want her crushed. I want this student and her bleeding heart professor to regret the day they spelled my name." Countersuits. Defamation. Tortious interference. Make an example of her. Cromwell hesitated. "It could draw press, Alexander. It will get noisy." "Good," Drake said flatly. "Let the world see what happens when a nobody takes a shot at me. Bury them." "As you wish," Cromwell replied, the sound of a predator closing in. Back at the legal aid clinic, a package arrived by courier, thick with intimidation. Carter slid it open, revealing a blistering rejection of their claims and a countersuit against Emily, defamation, seeking damages in the millions. Enough to bankrupt her and her family for generations. Emily's stomach dropped as the numbers swam before her eyes. "They're suing me." Her voice trembled. "It's a strategy," Carter said calmly, though her eyes were hard. "A slap suit. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's meant to silence you by fear and cost. They expect us to fold. Should we?" Emily whispered, fear pressing at her chest. "Absolutely not." Carter's voice rang sharp, her conviction unshaken. She tapped the countersuit papers with her pen. "This is arrogance. Cromwell just handed us a gift. To defend you against defamation, we now have the right to prove your words were true. That means depositions. Subpoenas. Witnesses. He's opened the door for us to dig deeper into Drake's world." Emily inhaled, the fear in her chest cooling into resolve. She had been humiliated once. She would not be silenced now. Carter flipped through Emily's notes, her eyes scanning for names. She stopped at one. "Leo Kendrick. You said he was a friend, yes?" Emily nodded. "He was working that night. He saw everything. But he's timid. He has a family. He was terrified when Drake exploded." "All the more reason," Carter said. "Fear is powerful. But so is justice. We need him." That evening, Emily sat in a quiet coffee shop, notebook open before her, waiting. The door creaked, and Leo entered, shoulders hunched, eyes darting. He slid into the booth, his hands trembling as he stirred his coffee. "I can't," he muttered. "Donovan will fire me." "Drake, you don't know what a man like that can do." Emily leaned forward, her voice soft but urgent. "Leo, he already destroyed me. He will do worse to others. This is our chance to stand up. To take back what's ours." Carter slid a paper across the table. It was a preliminary calculation of the tips Donovan had skimmed over 3 years. The number made Leo's breath catch. Enough for a house. Enough to change his children's future. He looked at Emily, her tired eyes, her determined jaw. He remembered the shame he felt watching her get fired, knowing he said nothing. His fists clenched, trembling. "Okay," he said at last. "What do you need me to do?" Carter's eyes glinted. The fortress had its first crack. The war had truly begun. The days that followed blurred into long hours of paperwork, coffee-stained notes, and the relentless hum of printers. At the legal aid clinic, the small team of students worked like soldiers in a campaign, boxes of documents piling higher with each delivery from Cromwell's firm. Most of it was useless clutter, deliberately overwhelming. A tactic to exhaust them. But Professor Carter refused to bend. "We sift," she told them, her voice steady, her eyes sharp. Every page. Every number. Somewhere in here is a truth they are desperate to hide. Emily worked until her fingers cramped, cross-referencing receipts with schedules, payroll sheets with tip logs. When Leo Kendrick's sworn affidavit landed in Carter's hands, everything changed. Armed with his testimony, Carter filed a motion to compel Donovan to produce the unredacted tip-out records. The judge reviewed the affidavit, his expression cool, then ruled in their favor. When the documents arrived, Carter spread them across the long oak table in the clinic's conference room. The evidence was plain, glaring. A systematic deduction of 15% from every server's tips, month after month, year after year. The numbers screamed theft. "Smoking gun," Carter murmured, sliding her glasses higher. "Gerard Donovan's game is over." Emily traced her finger along one column of figures. Each missing dollar represented food unbought, medicine delayed, rent unpaid. Rage and vindication tangled in her chest. For years Donovan had stolen from people who could least afford it. Now his deceit was laid bare in black and white. But Carter's vision stretched further than the restaurant. She assigned a smaller team to dig into Alexander Drake's company. "I don't care about his quarterly reports," she said. "I want complaints, sealed suits, fines, whispers. Men like him always have bodies buried." Emily threw herself into research. Nights disappeared into the blue glow of her laptop, hours swallowed by legal databases and obscure journals. Most of it was armor-polished propaganda, charitable donations, glossy product launches, articles praising his genius. But then she stumbled upon a footnote in an environmental law journal. It mentioned a microchip plant owned by Drake's company in a town called Oak Creek. Her hometown. Emily's blood chilled. Oak Creek was where Claire had grown up running through creeks, playing in fields that now felt poisoned in memory. For years, strange illnesses had stalked the town. Neighbors whispered about a curse, but doctors called it coincidence. Dozens of children, many Claire's age, had been diagnosed with rare, aggressive cancers. Emily dug deeper, her hands trembling. She unearthed records of local protests, dismissed as small and unfounded. She found mention of a sealed lawsuit filed by a safety manager years ago, dropped abruptly after a settlement. Most damning of all, she uncovered geological surveys placing the plant directly upstream from the town's aquifer, the water everyone drank. Her breath caught. Claire's illness. The others. It all connected. She printed everything and ran to Professor Carter's office, bursting through the door without knocking. Pages scattered across the desk as she spoke in gasps. "It's Oak Creek. It's Claire. He poisoned us." Carter scanned the documents, her calm cracking into cold fury. She saw the maps, the lawsuit, the evidence pointing toward years of chemical dumping. She closed the file, then looked at Emily with eyes like fire. "This changes everything," she said. "The wrongful termination case is not the prize. It is the lever. Drake thinks he is fighting a nuisance suit. He has no idea the storm he has unleashed." Emily's knees weakened. She gripped the back of a chair, steadying herself. This was no longer about her humiliation. It was about justice for an entire community. For Claire. For the children of Oak Creek. Professor Carter stood, pacing with fierce energy. "We can't introduce this into the current suit. It will be struck as irrelevant. But it's our weapon, our hidden blade. When the time comes, we will strike." Emily pressed her palms flat on the desk. "He ruined my life once. He ruined my town forever. He will not walk away again." Carter's lips curved into a grim smile. "Good. Then prepare yourself. The battlefield has shifted. This is no longer just a case. This is war." Outside, the city buzzed with indifference, lights glittering against the night. But inside that small office, a new fire had been lit. Emily Vargas was no longer simply a waitress wronged. She was the face of Oak Creek's reckoning. The discovery of Oak Creek transformed the legal clinic into a war room. Maps of aquifers and factory blueprints hung beside payroll ledgers and deposition transcripts. Students huddled in corners, highlighting documents, piecing together timelines. Emily moved among them, her exhaustion burned away by purpose. She was no longer only fighting for herself. She was fighting for Claire, for Oak Creek, for every family scarred by Alexander Drake's empire. Meanwhile, Donovan's deposition became the clinic's first real victory. Under the glare of fluorescent lights and Carter's relentless questioning, the restaurant owner unraveled. He admitted the administrative fee skimmed from tips. He admitted Drake had threatened him that night, demanded Emily's firing under threat of financial ruin. By the end, his lawyer begged for a recess, but the damage was done. Carter seized the opening. She offered Donovan a deal: testify against Drake in exchange for a manageable settlement for the staff's stolen wages. Cornered and terrified, Donovan agreed. His sworn affidavit painted Drake as the puppet master, manipulating him into breaking the law. It was a turning point. Soon after, Emily and Carter tracked down Celeste Rowan, Drake's date that night. At first reluctant, Celeste eventually admitted she had ended things with Drake because of his cruelty. She provided a statement corroborating Emily's account of his abuse, every venomous word, every flash of arrogance. Another nail in the coffin. The fortress was cracking. But Carter wanted more. She reached out to a retired detective named Frank, hiring him with clinic funds to find Robert Fletcher, the former safety manager who had once sued Drake's company. Frank found him in another state, living quietly under a new name, his life hollowed by fear. In a dingy motel room, Carter laid out the evidence they had gathered. Fletcher's hands shook as he spoke, his eyes haunted. He described being ordered to falsify waste records, how he warned about failing liners in chemical ponds, how he was silenced with threats and an NDA. "I can't testify," he whispered, "but if I were you, I'd subpoena disposal records from Tri-State Environmental. The contractor's logs won't be forged." It was the missing piece. Armed with this, Carter prepared her boldest move yet. She leaked part of the Aurelia wage theft story to investigative journalist Ronan Hale, a man known for ripping apart corporate titans. The article painted Drake as a petty bully whose temper had triggered a lawsuit exposing wage theft at an elite restaurant. The public read with fascination. Investors whispered with unease. Drake's lawyers panicked, offering Emily a settlement, $100,000 and a strict NDA. Carter slid the offer across her desk, her expression unreadable. Emily studied the number. A year ago, it would have changed everything. It would have paid for Claire's treatments. It would have lifted them from desperation. But she thought of Fletcher, of Oak Creek's poisoned water, of children playing in creeks that glowed with chemicals. She pushed the paper back. "Tell them no," she said. "Tell them I want a face-to-face meeting with Alexander Drake." Carter's eyes narrowed with approval. "Interesting. You want him in the room." "He started this by refusing to look at me," Emily said, her voice steady. "It will end with him forced to." Carter smiled, the faintest curve of pride. "Then we will demand a final settlement conference. All parties present. Let the lion walk into the trap." Days later, the conference room at Cromwell and Dane gleamed with glass and mahogany. Alexander Drake sat at the head of the table, flanked by Leonard Cromwell and a team of high-priced lawyers. His phone lay on the table, his demeanor casual, as though this were a tedious formality. Across from him sat Emily, Professor Carter, and a single junior associate. They looked small against the skyscraper's vast view, but Emily's eyes burned with resolve. Donovan sat further down, pale and diminished, his lawyer whispering frantically. Cromwell cleared his throat, his voice booming. "We are here to finalize a settlement. My client offers $100,000 in exchange for full release of claims and permanent non-disclosure." Professor Carter's smile was sharp. "We're not here for that. We're here to present the full scope of our complaint." She laid a folder on the table, her voice slicing through Cromwell's bluster. She outlined Donovan's affidavit, the wage theft evidence, Celeste Rowan's corroboration. Each piece landed like a hammer. For the first time, Drake put down his phone. His jaw tightened. Finally, he spoke, his voice laced with contempt. Enough of this. Name your price. Everyone has one. His icy eyes locked on Emily, daring her to speak. Emily's heart thundered, but her voice was calm. You're right. I do have a price. But it's not money you can buy. Professor Carter's hand brushed another binder forward, thicker than the rest. She spoke with deliberate weight. We need to discuss Oak Creek. Drake's mask cracked. For the first time, shock flickered across his face. The trap had sprung. The words, Oak Creek, hung in the air like a guillotine's blade. For a long, suffocating moment, no one moved. Leonard Cromwell's confident posture faltered, his brow furrowing. Donovan shrank deeper into his chair. But it was Alexander Drake's reaction that electrified the room. His face, usually carved in arrogance, drained pale, eyes narrowing in sudden calculation. Professor Carter's voice sliced through the silence, calm but deadly. In the course of discovery, we began examining Mr. Drake's broader business practices. What we found is disturbing. Oak Creek has been suffering from a statistically impossible cluster of rare cancers, beginning shortly after your company opened its microchip plant. The plant sits directly upstream of the town's aquifer. She slid the thick binder into the center of the table. Inside lay geological maps, water samples, medical records, and Fletcher's whispered directions pointing toward Tri-State Environmental. We also located Robert Fletcher, your former safety manager. He told us about falsified waste records and failing liners in your chemical ponds. We have subpoenaed Tri-State's logs. They tell the truth your company tried to bury. Cromwell shifted uneasily, sweat beading on his temple. This is irrelevant to the matter at hand. On the contrary, Carter replied. Your defamation countersuit opened the door. To prove Emily's words were true, we can depose anyone, request any record tied to your behavior. And now, Mr. Drake, your arrogance has allowed us to discover your greatest crime. Emily leaned forward, her voice trembling with fury but steady in resolve. My sister Claire has leukemia. She played in Miller's Creek, the water that runs past your plant. You didn't just humiliate me in a restaurant. You poisoned my family. You poisoned my town. Drake's mask of indifference shattered. He leaned forward, veins straining in his neck, his voice a hoarse whisper. What do you want? Carter produced a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a settlement offer. It was a list of terms. 1. She read aloud, a public apology to Emily Vargas. 2. Full repayment to every employee of Aurelia, plus damages for years of stolen wages. 3. The creation of a $500 million compensation fund for the victims of Oak Creek. 4. An independent environmental cleanup supervised by federal authorities. And 5. A private settlement to ensure Claire Vargas receives the best medical care in the world, for the rest of her life. The amount is blank. You will fill it in. The room was silent except for the scratch of Drake's pen as he stared at the paper. His lawyers whispered frantically, but he waved them off. He had built an empire on dominance, but for the first time, he was cornered. With a trembling hand, he scrawled an 8-figure number in the blank space and signed his name. It was done. The fall of Alexander Drake began that very day. News of the settlement and the Oak Creek revelation spread like wildfire. Investors fled, journalists descended, regulators sharpened their knives. Drake, once untouchable, became the symbol of corporate greed and cruelty. His name was forever tied to poisoned water and broken families. But for Emily Vargas, the victory was not the money. It was the justice it represented. The fund brought real care to the families of Oak Creek, hope to people who had long suffered in silence. Claire received treatment from the best doctors, her smile brighter than hospital lights. Emily finished law school at the top of her class. She did not chase a corner office in some glossy skyscraper. Instead, she used her settlement to establish a foundation, a legal force dedicated to defending those crushed by power, those who felt voiceless. In every case she took, she carried the memory of Aurelia's chandeliers, of Drake's smirk, of the night she walked away in humiliation. And she carried the lesson Professor Carter had once spoken: the law is the great equalizer. Emily Vargas had begun as a waitress silenced in public disgrace. She ended as a warrior who proved that no one is too small to challenge the powerful, and no one is too mighty to escape justice. And though Alexander Drake would fade into infamy, Emily's name would echo in courtrooms and communities alike, as the woman who stood, fought, and changed everything. This story reminds us that dignity and justice are not privileges reserved for the wealthy and powerful. True strength lies in standing up against arrogance and cruelty, no matter how impossible the odds may seem. With courage, persistence, and the right allies, even a single voice can challenge corruption and bring hope to many. This is a work of fiction, crafted to feel realistic so that its lessons may resonate. The characters, events, and places are imagined, but the message remains real: no one is too small to seek justice, and no one is too powerful to escape accountability. Thank you for watching and listening to this story. If it inspired you or touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments, give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Your support means the world to us.